It started as a routine excavation. The kind archaeologists have done thousands of times before. A team arrived at the site expecting pottery fragments, foundations, maybe a burial or two. Nothing unusual. Just another slow uncovering of the past, layer by layer, under the sun. Then the ground changed. At first, it was subtle. Tools began striking stone where there shouldn't have been any. Not loose rubble. Not collapsed walls. This was solid. Cat. Intentional. Too precise for its depth and location. The team slowed down. Measurements were taken. Photos were logged. Someone joked nervously that they'd hit bedrock early. But it wasn't bedrock. As more soil was cleared, shapes began to appear. Straight lines. Right angles. Surfaces smoothed in a way nature doesn't do on its own. Whatever this was, it had been placed there deliberately. And it was deep. Deeper than structures from that period were supposed to exist. That's when excitement replaced routine. Because archaeology lives for moments like this. If confirmed, this find could push timelines back. Rewrite assumptions. Force uncomfortable questions about who was capable of building what and when. But the deeper they went, the stranger it felt. There were no expected artifacts nearby. No scattered tools. No everyday objects. Just emptiness surrounding something massive and hidden, as if it had been sealed off on purpose. Then came the first internal discussion. Some team members urged caution. Others wanted to continue immediately. Everyone understood what was at stake. Discoveries like this don't come twice in a career. But something else began to happen. Word spread. Not to the public. Not to the media. Upward. Calls were made. Emails sent. Coordinates shared with people who were not on site. People who didn't normally get involved this early. And suddenly, the atmosphere changed. No one said it out loud yet. But the excitement had shifted into tension. The kind that makes people lower their voices without realizing it. Because when a discovery moves faster than the dig itself, it usually means someone powerful is paying attention. And that's when the digging stopped feeling routine. The instruction didn't arrive with urgency. There was no shouting. No dramatic confrontation. It came quietly. An email. Then a phone call. And finally, a visit. Officials arrived who were not listed on the project's original permits. They didn't wear excavation gear. They didn't ask many questions. They already seemed to know what had been found. The lead archaeologist was pulled aside. Conversations happened out of earshot. Voices stayed calm, but faces didn't. When the team regrouped, the message was brief. They were to stop digging. Immediately. No explanation was given. Not a temporary pause. Not a request to slow down. A full halt. Tools down. Area secured. No further disturbance of the site until further notice. At first, it sounded procedural. Archaeology is regulated. Discoveries can trigger reviews, safety checks, funding reassessments. But this felt different. The paperwork didn't match the urgency. There were no safety concerns cited. No structural risks. No environmental threats. Just a simple instruction. Do not dig any further. The team pushed back gently. Asked for clarification. Asked who was making the call. Asked how long the pause would last. Answers were vague. It's above our level. Protocols are being followed. You'll be informed when it's appropriate. That word stuck. Appropriate. As if uncovering history could suddenly become inappropriate. The site was fenced off the same day. Security appeared overnight. Not local guards. Not standard site protection. These people were trained, professional, quiet. Phones were discouraged, photos restricted, notes collected. The dig, which had been weeks in the making, was frozen in time. What unsettled the team most wasn't the stop itself. It was how fast it happened. Discoveries usually move slowly through layers of bureaucracy. Committees, reviews, approvals. This bypassed all of that. Someone high enough had seen enough and decided it should go no further. Rumors began circulating among the crew. Was it a tomb? A religious structure? Something politically sensitive? But none of the guesses fit, because whatever lay beneath hadn't been identified yet. They hadn't even reached it. And that raised a disturbing possibility. That the order wasn't based on what they found, but on what someone feared they might find. After the order came down, the site felt wrong. Not quiet. Not abandoned. Paused. Tools lay exactly where they'd been dropped. Trowels half buried. Measuring strings still stretched tight. The trench wall stood exposed, as if waiting for hands that would never return. Before security fully sealed the area, a few team members were allowed back briefly. Officially, it was to document the current state of the dig. Unofficially, they were trying to understand what had triggered the shutdown. One detail kept coming up. A layer that didn't belong. The stratigraphy was wrong. Every archaeological site tells a story through layers. Soil builds up slowly. Civilizations leave traces in predictable sequences. Stone, ash, debris, erosion. Time stacks neatly, like pages in a book. But here, the sequence broke. Beneath a layer dated to a known historical period was something older. Much older. Yet it showed signs of having been disturbed after it was buried. As if someone had gone down into deep history, altered something, and then sealed it back up. That alone was unusual. What was worse was the material itself. The layer wasn't typical stone or packed earth. It was compacted in a way that suggested intent. Precision. Almost architectural. Smooth surfaces where there shouldn't be any. Right angles where nature usually curves. One archaeologist later described it as a flaw where no flaw should exist. Ground-penetrating scans taken before the shutdown hinted at voids below. Empty spaces. Chambers, maybe. Or tunnels. But the scans were never officially released. Only fragments remained. Cropped images. Partial readouts. Enough to suggest structure, but not enough to prove it. And then there were the markings. Faint impressions on stone fragments pulled from the upper layers. Not symbols anyone recognized. Not decoration. More like alignment marks. Measurements. Guides. Functional, not artistic. That detail mattered. Because it suggested whoever built this wasn't trying to be remembered. They were trying to build something that worked. And if that was true, then the most important part of the site was still buried. Exactly where the digging had been stopped. What happened next was quieter than anyone expected. No press conference. No public explanation. No dramatic shutdown footage. The site didn't disappear overnight. It faded. Within days, official references to the dig began to thin out. Project pages were updated with vague language. Delayed. Under review. Pending reassessment. Then they were removed entirely. Researchers who had posted photos were asked to take them down. Not ordered. Asked. Emails arrived using careful wording. Professional tone. Legal undertones just beneath the surface. Some complied immediately. Others hesitated. Those who tried to access shared databases found their permissions revoked. Cloud folders returned error messages. External drives were requested for archiving purposes. A few archaeologists later admitted something unsettling. They hadn't been told to destroy anything. They were told it was already being handled. Handled by who, exactly, was never made clear. What survived were fragments. A low-resolution scan saved to a personal laptop. A notebook page photographed before being handed over. A short video clip recorded unintentionally, showing a stone surface before the camera cuts away. Individually, these fragments meant nothing. Together, they hinted at something precise being removed from public view. The most disturbing loss was the context. Without the full records, dates couldn't be confirmed. Measurements couldn't be cross-checked. Interpretations became speculation. And that was the point. Once the data was gone, the site became just another rumor. Another half-remembered story buried beneath bureaucracy. But a few details refused to disappear. One involved orientation. The buried structure, whatever it was, appeared aligned not to cardinal directions, but to something else. A shift of just a few degrees. Consistent. Intentional. Another detail was depth. The layer sat far deeper than it should have for its apparent age. Too deep for conventional timelines. Too deep to be accidental. And then there was the reaction. Archaeologists are trained to handle surprises. Unexpected finds don't usually cause panic. They cause excitement. This caused restraint. Urgent restraint. As if continuing wasn't just risky. As if it crossed a boundary no one wanted to name. There is an unspoken rule in archaeology. Not everything that is found is announced. Most people imagine discoveries as moments of celebration. Press releases. Museum exhibits. Documentaries. But behind the scenes, there is another reality. A quieter one. Some discoveries don't fit. They don't fit timelines. They don't fit funding narratives. They don't fit what institutions are prepared to explain. And when that happens, the response is rarely dramatic. It is administrative. Committees are formed. Reviews are scheduled. Experts are consulted behind closed doors. Language becomes careful. Words like anomalies and outlier appear more often than breakthrough. Because archaeology doesn't just uncover objects. It reinforces history. And history is a structure people rely on. If one piece doesn't belong, it doesn't just raise a question. It threatens the shape of the whole. In this case, the concern wasn't what the structure was. It was what it implied. If the dating was correct, then the builders existed earlier than accepted civilization models allow. That would mean advanced planning, precise engineering, and symbolic intent at a time we are told humans were incapable of such things. That's not a small adjustment. That's a rewrite. And rewrites are expensive. They destabilize textbooks. They undermine decades of research. They force uncomfortable questions about what else may have been overlooked or ignored. So instead, uncertainty is contained. Access is limited. Discussion is redirected. Funding quietly moves elsewhere. Nothing is denied outright. It's simply never confirmed. Several archaeologists involved later described the same feeling. Not fear. Pressure. The sense that continuing wasn't worth the professional cost. That pushing too hard would isolate them. Stall careers. Close doors permanently. One researcher described it bluntly. It felt like we had crossed from science into something political. That's when the dig truly ended. Not when the tools stopped. But when curiosity became inconvenient. The site was sealed quietly. No announcement. No press conference. No official explanation that satisfied anyone who had been there. From the outside, it looked like nothing had happened. A routine excavation. A project paused. A team reassigned. The ground restored to silence. But for those who worked at the site, the questions never left. They remembered the precision of the stonework. The way the chambers aligned with no obvious practical purpose. The measurements that repeated again and again, as if following a rule no one could yet explain. They remembered the moment they were told to stop. Not ordered. Advised. A subtle but important difference. Because advice can't be challenged. It can only be accepted. Years later, satellite images would show faint disturbances beneath the surface, shapes that suggested the dig had barely scratched the top of something larger. Independent researchers would notice inconsistencies in official reports. Missing data. Redacted pages. Photos that were never released. But without access, speculation was all that remained. And speculation is easy to dismiss. That is how mysteries survive. Not through secrecy alone, but through distance. Through time. Through the slow fading of attention. Yet one question continues to echo. If there was nothing worth finding, why stop digging? History is not just what we uncover. It is also what we choose to leave buried. And sometimes, the most revealing discoveries are the ones we are told not to see. Because when the ground is closed and the tools are put away, the silence that follows speaks louder than any artifact ever could. Somewhere beneath that sealed earth, something remains unfinished. Not because it was proven unimportant, but because it was never allowed to be fully understood.